young, being female, being blonde, unfortunately can go against you sometimes. And the only way to combat that is to prove yourself.
I'll pick you up and turn you round. I'll leave you standing strong on solid ground to save you from these shifting sands, to join the earth right where I stand.
Yes, it's very hard for somebody to be with a perceived strong woman. It's a real shame that a woman in some sort of spotlight is termed to be strong rather than just a woman, you know, doing what a lot of other men do.
I'm in chains. I'm in chains. I'm in chains. I'm in chains.
You know, I think women have had a rough deal for a while. I think it has improved immensely, and I think it will continue to improve. I think the thing that people were fearful of, I guess, were women maybe gaining a little bit too much power.
Sooner or later, love is gonna get you. Sooner or later, oh, you got to give in. Sooner or later, love is gonna get you. Sooner or later, love is gonna win.
Performing wise, you know, you can get your cultures and the screaming girls, but you know, they just love any sort of male that's willing to take the top up type thing. But you know, we don't get the screaming guys that are just, you know, it just doesn't work that way. Which is
I think the main obstacles are men and older men too, because they think that you're young and they have to take that control position.
So you're surrounded by so many men. At any time you're going to be surrounded by about 20 men because there just aren't women around. There aren't women in the road crew. There aren't women in the record companies. There aren't women managers. There aren't women in the band. And if you're the only female, you're definitely isolated, really isolated. And not only isolated, you're different.
Back for more, just like a dog. I lap it up, just like a dog. No steady hand pushing me right back. Misunderstand, I know I'm not like that. And I can't stand how I keep coming back for more, just like a dog. I lap it up, just like a dog.
We're just put in the same basket, and it's really frustrating and really annoying. And the only way you feel you can get ahead is by being unique and being the only girl in the industry. So it kind of gets really competitive and sort of slightly, you're always slightly wary of other girls basically, because you know the more there are, the more we're all just going to be put in the same basket, and there can only be one good one according to the industry, if you know what I mean.
So weird because like people always are saying, you know, they think it's really sinister that these girls have got together, and you know, why are they in a band all together? What are they trying to say? You know, they're trying to, you know, get rid of the patriarchy or whatever. But you know, you're in it to play music, you're in it to make your music. Although we are get it girls.
Between the First and Second World Wars, there were a number of all-female orchestras that played throughout Australia. Because of competition for jobs and the idea at that time that a woman's place was in the home, these orchestras had disappeared by the 1950s. In the early 1950s, the sound of rock and roll exploded across the world. For the duration of the 50s, women performers in rock and roll were mostly unheard. By the early 60s, as rock and roll became more acceptable, women were able to participate in the music industry as singers. The 1960s saw the music industry change with the rise of all male guitar bands like the Beatles, the Stones, and in Australia, the Easy Beats. These bands were marketed to teenage girls who flocked to buy records and concert tickets. Occasionally, women performers did make it onto the charts, but again, only as singers performing songs usually written by males. Prior to 1970, women were not allowed by law to drink in hotels. This changed due to the rise of the women's liberation movement and forever altered the culture of Australian pubs. Hotels suddenly became an environment where bands could play and develop their grassroots following. In this traditional male domain, the music was masculine and hard rock orientated. Pub rock came to dominate the Australian charts through the 70s with such bands as AC/DC and Cold Chisel. At the same time, female singers like Renee Geyer and Marsha Hines had hits by appearing on live television programs like Countdown and Sounds. In the late 1970s, punk rock from Britain and the US arrived in Australia. Punk rock's do-it-yourself, anti-muso attitude gave women access as instrumentalists and songwriters for the first time. The new wave which followed in the early 1980s was a progression of these ideas. It experimented with innovative musical styles and androgynous images. Once again, women had a platform to play on. The trend has continued and extended. By the mid-1990s, we are now seeing women working in most areas of the music industry. It's been a long road, but finally, sisters are doing it for themselves.
Certainly, I'm guilty of singing into a hairbrush. But I can admit it because I'm sure just about everybody has at some point. So I guess I dreamed of being famous or a star to that degree, but again, not seriously. Same as all kids do.
I started on Talent Time at the age of 8.5, almost 9, spent 7.5 years on that program, 6 days a week. Shuffled my entire family's life completely around.
The five of us actually met at dancing school. So we'd been singing and dancing and acting, and some of us playing instruments and stuff for like 10 years each before we actually got to this stage.
I was kind of singing. Singing was my big thing at school, as opposed to writing songs. And then when I met Julia, and like she was like a writer and a songwriter, I kind of got spurred on to write songs. So
Did you meet her at school?
yeah, when we were in about year 10, we started sort of becoming friends.
Were you performing while you were still at school?
Yeah, we were sort of always scheming to. We like went in talent quests, and we used to play in coffee shops and just anywhere that would have us.
Really?
Yeah, and we went on that show, Have a Go, and we got the whistle.
I just knew I could sing because I loved to sing all the time. Whether I was good or not, I didn't know, because when you're a kid, you think you sound fantastic when you're screaming. So, or you think you're sounding good when you're screaming, but you actually sound terrible. But I loved to sing to anything and to anyone who'd listen.
I was offered a tour here as a backing vocalist, and had lived vicariously through these people that I'd lived with and met about Australia. Jumped at the chance, and once I got here, decided I was incredibly thrilled to be out of Los Angeles.
I decided I wanted to play drums, and my parents, my dad bought me a drum kit, and I was playing in the school band, and then I got a drum teacher, and he was a jazz drummer. So I started out learning a lot of jazz stuff, and then learned some rock stuff, and he taught me how to read music and that. So
The first time we played was at a school dance, and
It went down very well, didn't it, Kim?
We had to hide under tables after that, and nobody liked us very much at all. But hey, we were trying. It was kind of the first like band that school had seen, although the girl from Girl Monster used to go there.
It was a talent quest and nobody entered, and then a girlfriend of mine said, "Oh, Patricia can sing," and I could have crowned her. And I was very shy, but I was literally, well, there wasn't much of me to carry, but I was carried onto the stage and I was forced to sing a song, which I did. A talent scout, as they were called in those days, from EMI Records happened to be there. He'd heard about this little kid that could sing, and so he came along and asked me if I'd like to audition at EMI Records, not dreaming that anything would come of it, because I was going to be a doctor.
We all get hurt by love, and we all have a cross to bear. But in the name of understanding now, the problem should be shared.
I did a mini-series when I was 16 years old, and that was the first time I was working, doing television with a mind of my own. And one of the things I used to do with another girl in the cast is we'd always be singing together, and I remember learning to harmonize at that point, which is something I couldn't grasp before. I just could never find the note. And so we were doing that, and once I'd finished doing that mini-series, I'd made a little bit of money from it, so I put that into making a demo tape with 3 songs on it. And went in and recorded those, and I did the demo tape, and that was more or less as something to accompany my acting tapes. Oh, if you need someone to sing in something, then maybe I could do that for you. So that was the first step I made towards doing any work as a singer.
I got asked to sing backing vocals for Neil Murray in his band The Rainmakers. At my graduating performance, I was asked to sing live, a cappella, so I had no musical instruments backing me up, for one of the dancers who was graduating in my year as well. And I didn't know that there was record company people there. So, you know, a week later I get a phone call saying, you know, you've got a couple of record companies interested in meeting you. Do you have any demo tapes? And it's like, well, you're kidding, I'm a dancer. I've never made any demo tapes before.
Women face special obstacles before they even start in the industry. It is still not accepted that females can play rock instruments or can rock as effectively as the boys. Parents, teachers and friends are less inclined to encourage girls to play rock, buy them instruments, or even show them basic techniques.
At the beginning we were always sort of told, oh, girls can't play music. Yeah.
Our boy will say to his mother, I'm going to be a lead guitarist when I grow up. And he goes ahead and does it. If a 15-year-old girl says that, it's kind of like, well, perhaps...
We'll book a psychiatrist for 12:30 on Monday.
That's right.
I tried to play at school. I took up the bass at school, but I sort of got discouraged a lot. Boys, like the story I told you I had before, I once played in front of the class and the boys made me cry when I was in about year 10. They were just hassling me about being a girl playing music, and then I stopped for like quite a while until I moved to Sydney.
Early on, even high school band, you know, the school band teacher would say, okay, Patty, I was the only girl in the playing drums, and he would make me play like the bells or something, or just cymbals, and I had to really fight and try really hard to, you know, be able to play like just snare drum parts. And
one above and one below.
I always felt I had always try harder being a girl, and I was always a novelty. I've been in lots of bands, and bands with all girls and bands with just guys, and in the guy bands it was a novelty girl drummer, you know, and there was always that thing, oh, you can play drums like a guy, and that was like, that's not a compliment to me.
I would do most anything I can, baby, for you, baby, for you.
That general feeling that came out of the mid-70s that women simply were not musicians, and I had that said to me by my peer group in the mid-70s, by other artists, male artists quite a bit, that women simply could not be musicians. That thinking has changed. That would never be said now, and no one would, people probably don't think it, but it was said in the 70s.
All went to school together, and we met when we were in about year 8, music class, and we're all in the same music class, and we all got kicked out of the same music class.
Women could not be musicians apart from being the singer in a band. That women just could not get the feel. They couldn't blow the right way if you were talking about a saxophonist, or they couldn't play with other people if you were talking about drums.
For first starters, it's very hard for me to see myself as an Aboriginal woman musician, because it was never meant to be for Aboriginal women to do these things, to get up and sing. See, that's why I never showed any of my songs to anybody.
1950s and 60s, women were only accepted in the recording industry if they had a girl next door image. The songs, written by men, were songs about loving or losing the boy of their dreams.
The males were very, very sexy. You know, all the girls used to love them and fall over and grab them. But the females had to be, I think, professional virgins. You know, they had to be totally untouchable. Very, very ladylike, very, very pris.
The only show that wouldn't have me was Bandstand. The compere said I was too fat. I was 11.5 stone, and he didn't want anybody that was plump in those days on the show. He only wanted the pretty little girls, so I never got on Bandstand. But
with the latest hairstyle, diminutive Judy Stone was flying high with her biggest hit song.
Maybe 4,003,221 kids from now.
I don't think it was an intentional image. I just feel that the people that were chosen to do Bandstand all had that little girl next door type image. Even somebody like Patsy Ann Noble, who was really beautiful, and well, her bust was certainly a lot bigger than Nolene Patley's and mine. She still had that lovely, friendly image. It was definitely not intentional, but it looks as if we were all cloned at the time. We all wore gingham dresses, and we all sort of sang very sweetly.
Started the rehearsal, and I wanted to do these songs which we did with the band, and one of them was Hippie Hippie Shake, and another one was Cradle of Love. They happened to be boys' songs, which was no concern of mine. I just did them because they were good songs. And I was running through Hippie Hippie Shake, and John came over and said, "Oh, no, you can't do that song." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Oh, that's a boy's song." He said, "You can't sing a boy's song." I said, "Yes, I can." And then we had a few terse words. And in the end, I said, "Well, I don't want to do your show." And he said, "Well, I don't want you on the show." And off I went, and I just left.
Cause he's my blonde-headed stomp, went for real gun super boy. Yeah, 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 yeah. All the gang from the club will be surfing and stomping too. Riding their boys out on that sea of blue.
And it's not even nasty because it was just how the times were. The most negative thing that would have happened to me and other girl singers would have been that they never ever closed a bill. No matter how many hit records I had, I still didn't close a bill if there were men on the bill as well. That was how life was in those days. Men closed the show.
Do you get a greater reaction from boys than you do with girls, Lee?
I think it's equally divided, really. I get more or less the same reactions from both. I can't say I get bigger reactions from girls than I do from boys.
I guess nothing
How long do you think a top pop star in Australia can stay on top?
Until someone else comes along that's better, someone else that the kids like more.
The pub rock culture of the 1970s had an insidious effect for women in music because the music favoured by the pub environment was masculine. The pub was the boys' club. The bands that played the pub circuit were bands of boys.
I think one of the reasons that I received a lot of criticism in the beginning was that I didn't do the 10-year pub circuit, you know, starving band member scenario. But I did pay my dues in a different way. It's like I entered the industry through the back door rather at the front door where everyone's knocking and there's a crowd trying to get in that door.
In early days as a backing vocalist, as a chick singer, if you will, with, for instance, models in the pub scene and a much more of a rock thing that I'm, much more of a rock world than what I'm in now, you definitely had your place, but there were also males of my generation that wasn't their reality, so that really helped. So therefore you could just laugh at it because it is pretty absurd. It's very funny and comical.
Dress, like, say we go into a pub dressed like this. Do you know what would get called? You know what they'd yell out? You know, show us your tits, you know, that's how they are, you know.
I think the main problem with the Australian music industry is it is exceedingly unprofessional. And I think by that very nature, it drives a lot of women who might otherwise think of having a career in this industry out of it. And so the people who are left end up being the chaps who have invariably risen to the top after starting their career hauling black boxes on their backs as road crew.
We've found when we play gigs that a lot of girls will come up afterwards and talk to us and stuff, whereas if it's a band, a rock band of guys, if they go up and say, yeah, I thought you were great, they're seen as more of the groupie syndrome. They'll be seen as groupies going, oh, you guys are great, you're so cool, you know, we want to be a part of it. But girls come up to us and say, yeah, it's really good to see you getting up. And they just feel more comfortable coming up and saying hi to us afterwards, just saying that they were there.
There has always been an expectation that women in the music industry would have to fulfil certain image requirements of sexiness and beauty.
Your arms are warm, they make me feel as if they're made of cold, cold steel. A simple kiss like a turning key. A little click and the lock's on me.
I appreciate style. I love it. I think it's great. But I don't want it to drive my life and my career. And my motto is that if the clothes speak louder than me, I'm in trouble.
When I first started playing drums, I used to always wear a dress to emphasise the contradiction of being a woman on drums, because I was very, very politically motivated. I was very, very politically motivated at that stage. Of course, I just got too sick of that, of having to wear dresses and making sure that the skirts were ballooning and all that sort of stuff. And as I said, it's just not functional wearing a dress. So then I went back to wearing jeans all the time, which are really brilliant to play drums in. Finally, we got ourselves a hotshot manager in the mid-80s, and the first thing he said to me was, "Look, Lindy, you really should wear a dress on stage. It makes you look so pretty."
Just like
keeps telling me it's going to take a long time, and you know, I'll get there eventually, and I can't be in a rush for this to happen. And I sort of feel the sort of clock going tick, 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 tick. I just feel like I'm getting older, and this industry does have an obsession with young girls. You know, the younger you are, if you're female especially, the younger you are, the more people sort of revere you for some reason. It's like, oh, she's so young, and you know, she writes songs, and isn't that amazing? It's always like, and that people are still saying that to me now, as if my being young is a part of what makes me good, and I really hate that.
Sooner or later, love is gonna get ya. Sooner or later, boy, you got to give it. Sooner or later, love is gonna get ya. Sooner or later, love is gonna win.
We're young, so we know what's going on, like with music and fashion and stuff like that. But then it's like a lot older people are like telling us what's right and wrong, where we're living it. Do you know what I mean? And it's really strange how it kind of works, you know?
In work situations such as touring and recording, women often feel very isolated because there are so many more men employed in these areas.
The main obstacle I find is that when you're working with men and they're basically in the position, like in a sort of a mentor position to you, I tend to develop crushes on people very easily. And because you're sort of working with these people who are giving you this information and giving you this wisdom, you sort of, you're just in a position to develop a crush on them because they're kind of like this great older person, and you know, they know so much and they're doing so much for me, and that's my main problem that I have.
I just think that all sorts of misunderstandings can arise because you're a female, and for one of those things that happened to me was when someone in the band told one of the crew that I had a crush on him, which wasn't actually true, funny enough. But that guy in the crew began to really act really differently to me. Really silly, really corny. And that was a misunderstanding. And you have a number of misunderstandings with, so you're surrounded by so many men. At any time you're going to be surrounded by about 20 men.
Overseas, it's a bit of an eye-opener in Japan, you know, they're just, definitely, you know, it's very difficult to try and get along and work when
They don't even
females
let you in on the meetings when they're talking about you, and just
totally like you're not there almost, you know.
Yeah.
And that was very strange for us because, you know, we still usually like to have as much involvement as we can, you know. We go there thinking, oh, we'll have a meeting about the next clip or, you know, the next whatever we're doing over there. And they'd sort of not even look at you, and they get straight to your manager or any male around you but you. And
even your interpreter who happened to be a male.
No.
Yeah.
I just
How's
wouldn't want
these supposed to know, no?
No, they wouldn't want to deal with us at all.
The number of times that I'd be sitting backstage and a roadie had come back, I'd be holding my drumsticks, and a roadie had come backstage and say, "Where's the drummer?" And I'd say, "It's me." And they just simply wouldn't believe you. I was stopped a number of times from going on stages with my drumsticks by security people because they didn't believe that I was the drummer.
I just, ever since my music career has started, I've worked with just men. Not saying that's a bad sign or anything, but I just think it'd be a different change, a different light, different energy to what I've got to say, and if it was with women, it'd be interesting. Any woman. Ruby Hunter's offered to work with me, the Titters.
That's why I was desperate to get a female in the Go-Betweens, and finally I did it. By 1987 I had got a female in the band, and that was Amanda Brown, a violinist, incredibly good musician. And it was just fantastic to have her in the band. The whole band changed then for me. My whole experience changed. Just having another female, you know, I'd forgotten what it was like to get dressed up. I mean it. I had done away with makeup. I wasn't using makeup, wasn't using jewellery, I was had really turned really into a boy in a way.
Get lonely in hotel rooms?
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah, it can be a bit depressing, especially that sort of moment after sort of being in a room with, you know, a couple of hundred people all looking at you and clapping you and giving you all this energy. And then suddenly the venue's empty and people are like sweeping up empty beer cans. It's like, let's go back to my hotel room now. So, and it's particularly confronting, it was particularly confronting for me in Club Hoy when I suddenly wasn't sharing a room with Julia anymore. It's sort of, like it was kind of nice to have my own space, because I mean we were always really close, and she's really sort of, every morning she'd make me a cup of tea and stuff like that, and I kind of started to take that for granted after a while, like, oh, leave me alone, I just want to be alone. And then suddenly I was alone, and I realised that I really missed sort of having her in my room and sort of watching Rage with her after the show and stuff like that. So yeah, it gets a bit funny. Gets a bit lonely.
Unlike male artists who can maintain a family life while having a career in the music industry, for most women artists, there are many personal sacrifices. Women artists find it hard to maintain relationships, and of necessity must postpone having children.
It is damn hard to maintain personal relationships. It really is. As far as, I mean, a personal relationship with yourself, let alone with anybody else, you really have to fight a little bit for. Also, it's your entire life, and a lot of it you feel like, or I shouldn't speak for anybody else, I feel like I'm doing a lot of stuff for other people rather than for myself.
I was extremely well protected, so protected that, you know, my social life was zilch.
Oh no. Were you allowed to have boyfriends?
Well, it wasn't a case of being allowed to, I just didn't have time to. I was working. I was a working girl at 14, and I worked almost every night. Boyfriends, it didn't occur to me that to have a boyfriend.
I mean, I want to have a family eventually, and it seems to be, I just can't see a way that women can be in a band or singing or whatever and still have a baby. Like, men can do it and go on the road and the woman looks after the baby and the woman doesn't have a problem with that, and men can be on the road and their girlfriend comes with them. And like, I was talking to Paul Hester from Crowded House, name dropper there, but and I remember he was saying how when they went on tour in America, like all their girlfriends and wives came along with them and just like lived with them for 6 months or whatever while they're on the road. And I just thought, how easy for them for them to be able to still, I mean, their relationships were still really hard, but it's part of a woman's role in a way to support the man. And whereas my boyfriend for 4 years when I was in Club Hoy, there's no way he would follow me round, or, you know, it was always a real point of contention that I was in a band and that eventually that was going to sort of basically dictate what we did and how our relationship went, that my career was going to be, you know, quite demanding in a way.
All those years touring, it was absolutely impossible for me to have a child, and so I was 40 when I finally knew that I had to stop touring and have a child, and that's a long, really long time. It is impossible, I think, to have a child if you're a female in a band and the drummer. If you're not the songwriter, you don't have any power, and so if you're just the drummer or just the bass player, you're not controlling the band, and you would the band would have to be prepared to make a lot of sacrifices to take a nanny and child on tour. While radio continues to be conservative in its programming, women artists are the losers. The gender of the singer in a band seems to influence the programmer. Here on this chart of most broadcast songs of 1994, you can see the lack of female singers and female instrumentalists in groups that are broadcast on radio.
A song that attracted one of the highest accolades you could possibly hope for from 1994, Richard Kingsmill's Single of the Year.
You're
Cat Sharon.
kidding?
No, that was his favourite
Really?
single of the year.
There's no doubt commercial radio is anti-women. I mean, the typical answer, and like I started off, to actually cross over from being a sport reporter to you know, panelling and doing a music shift, I had to go to Newcastle and I had to do midnight to dawn. And I was in the ridiculous situation of where I was working on Live and Sweaty on national television on Friday nights, and 3 nights a week I was starting at 1 o'clock in the morning and going till 5 on Newcastle radio. And every now and then people would ring up and say, "Are you the same Debbie Spillane that's on television?" And I say, "Yeah." And they say, "Well, what are you doing on at this time of night?" And I'm like, "I'm a woman. This is where I belong on radio," you know.
But baby, baby,
unfortunately, most of the radio programmers in the country are male. You know, no, I don't mean that in a sexist way, by any way, shape or form. I have a lot of respect for males. However, you know, it is the situation, and it is unfortunate that female vocalists such as myself and Wendy have to fight a battle in order to get airplay.
Something quite interesting to be explored about how few women work on commercial radio, and those that do are either somebody's bloody offsider or they are contrived to sound like some woman on the end of a 0055 number, for God's sake.
It has only been in the last 15 years that Australian women songwriters have been given record deals. Women have recognised that it is necessary to write their own material to express their own feelings about being a woman. They also recognise that the songwriter has more power in the industry because of the high earnings through the sale and broadcast of their songs.
I'd swim right home and sit upon me. It's like being separated from now. I would do most anything I can, baby, for you.
If you're the songwriter, you're the one making the money in the band, because the person who makes the money in any band is the songwriter. The other musicians do not make anything like the songwriter makes because of the way the royalty system is set up.
But like what we've decided, you know, when we get ARPA checks and stuff like that, like we're going to make an agreement in the band. Like our first ARPA check was not for very much money, so we've made an agreement that if we do get large amounts of money, that like we're going to split it, like, I don't know, 10% like for each band member, and you know the majority goes to the songwriter.
You know, quite honestly, I've never made any money from this business. You know, the money that I've made, I've had to invest back into my career, you know, because I believed in myself, you know, and because I took the punt, you know.
But once you
start writing, it's a different ball game altogether. And, you know, I guess me writing, I began writing for, you know, I guess that much percent for financial reasons, but that much because I really wanted to.
When I get what I want, when I never want it again. Go on, take everything I want you to. Go on, take everything I want you to.
Yeah, some of them are four-ways, and some of them aren't. I get a portion of every song, but like songs like She Walks, that's it's kind of the fast punk rock song on the record. I get more of that one because I came up with the beat right away and said, let's put something to this, and so it kind of goes that way.
If you're writing songs, you're expressing yourself. You are expressing your culture, and the more girls there are expressing their subculture in songs, the more acceptable it will be for girls and their culture. So that it won't be, the mainstream won't be a male culture anymore. It'll be a female culture as well as a male culture, and people will understand the differences because people will be hearing females singing about their lifestyles and what they think and what they feel.
But I've found it beneficial, and it's a great means of expressing yourself. I can consider myself very inexperienced still, even though I've done some writing the past couple of years. So I would just like to learn more and do more.
I'll pick you up and turn you around. I'll leave you standing strong on solid ground to save you from the shifting sands that join me up right where I stand.
Slowly sort of taking my power or finding it as far as what I want to say in music. And hopefully that'll go on into my 60s, you know. I don't know that you ever really get to the end of that stuff. But I've always really admired writers, so much so that it's been really, you know, it sort of freezes you in your attempts sometimes. And it's been interesting trying to break through all your own boundaries and barriers that you put up for yourself.
We have, yeah, we're co-writing at the moment and collaborating with other writers and
we actually wrote a little bit on the first and second, but we're really getting into it on the third album. Yeah.
We've gotten to a point now where she's now starting to be brave enough and honest enough to know what it is she wants to say. And when she wrote, for example, Brave, I found these notes sitting in a London recording studio, and we were in a very frustrating, unhappy time. And I mean pacing up and down the desk in the studio. This is not the way we make hit records. You know, it's like really ugly people I've met in this industry. Anyway, as I said, I found those words and I said to her, these are fantastic. Oh no, they were like very personal words about being brave. My mother, she said to me, you know, you can do it and just be brave and stay here and do it and we'll get through it and all that. She'd written it all down and that was brave. So I picked it up and said, look at this, it's beautiful, do it. She said, no. She wouldn't let me do it. She didn't want to do it, and it wasn't until we came back to Australia and we put out Bedroom Eyes, and it was a huge success for someone else, that she finally got up the courage to record Brave.
And that's how that whole song came about, was just through the frustration of wanting to let go of everything and just move on, you know. And I was just like, I'm so tired of people thinking that they had perceived me and thought that they knew what I was about.
I kept on writing, and Archie didn't even know I was writing. And he came home one day and he started looking for me in the house. And he asked all the kids, where's your mother? And he walked into the bedroom. It's the first time he caught me and he saw me with this piece of paper in my hand. And before he could say anything, I started thinking, now this man, he thinks this is a love letter here. So I said, well, I'll just let him think that. So anyway, he walked in, what are you doing? I'm jumping like to say, what are you doing? Oh, nothing, Dad. And he saw this piece of paper, you know, because I say my Archie's slow, but he wasn't slow that day. His eyes were real fast. So I said, I go, nothing, Dad, because I didn't really want to tell him that I wrote a song. Would you want to tell Archie Roach that he just wrote a song?
But don't you listen to a word they say. It doesn't matter anyway.
I'll pick you up and turn you round, leave you standing on solid ground, strong on solid ground, to save you from these shifting sands, to join the earth right here where I stand.
It's fabulous. It's real poetry.
I think it was sort of words to oneself.
Hey, which way to? Come on over my place. We got too much to do, you know, time is a short space. But when we talk all day and when we talk all night, give me yeah till we see the morning light. Deadly weather for fishing today. Chase the thought of sleep away, chase sleep away, chase sleep away, chase sleep away. I think the monkey's coming out to play. I mean, I'm quite confident that this song's going to become a song that's going to be well known throughout the world for children, because it's a nursery rhyme. It's got a funny little story to it. And my twist was that I decided to make up a rap that would go with it.
That's the way a woman feels. She'll walk through fire if she has to. That's the way a woman feels when she loves someone.
That's right. I remember.
Yeah.
It's a fabulous lyric.
Yeah, it's
a fabulous lyric.
It's just basically, you know, to me, that song, it just speaks about the celebration of being a woman, you know. And when I wrote that song, I sort of thought, oh God, you know, I feel really good now. I felt like I'd made the transition there and then from young lady to a young woman, you know. And that song really confirmed it for me. It was like, you know, I really am liking being a woman finally.
Tiny thorns in my soul, you point them out, scold me lightly when I fell into this hole. You were there, holding tightly. You won't cover me if I call. You won't cover me now.
Your steady hand pushing me right back. Misunderstand. I know I'm not like that. And I can't stand how I keep coming back for more, just like a dog. I lap it up just like a dog. Which, I don't know if that's a particularly female trait, but to me it seems to be.
Oh gosh, this was pretty evil actually. Kirsten wrote the lyrics to the chorus because I was just stuck, I couldn't think of anything. It goes, I despise you, over and over again. She's got a pretty twisted psyche sometimes. Yeah, it just goes over and over.
One of the songs that I wrote that was recorded was Tina's Story, and I'm very proud of the chorus, which goes, as Tina grew older, she noticed some things, like the more power you have, the more beautiful you seem.
Seems I'm kind of stuck. I don't have much to say to you. I'm sick of how we talk. We go round in circles.
That's great. That was my last one. Mine was, and if you only knew what truth, reality steady and tighten my aching noose. They dig a grave into my soul. These tired thoughts are in control. Yeah.
Although it is true to say that most key management positions in record companies are male-dominated, that most A&R and publishing people are male, that most producers, sound engineers and roadies are male, there are some women working in the industry who are changing the face of the non-artist roles.
I'm FIFA Riccobono. I'm General Manager at Albert Productions and J. Albert & Son, the music publishing house. We're a totally independent company. Not only that, we've just opened up in the UK. Yes, that's
Really?
why it's been a very big year for us. We've been working on premises in the UK. We've actually just started constructing our studios and offices in London, and I've spent time back and forward. So from my point of view, the days have changed, obviously, and I spend quite a bit of time here and in England.
How long have you been here at Albert's?
I've been working with Albert's since I was 15. I came in as assistant to, I was actually secretary to the professional manager who used to do all the sheet music, and we used to sell music in those days, and I worked with him, And the most exciting thing about Albert's was that I actually left business college and came here, and I worked for someone that had a piano in their office and someone that played music. So to me that wasn't like going to work. It was like an extension of what I really enjoyed at home. My parents, my father in particular, loved music. In the 70s and early 80s we had, you know, a great percentage, between 30 and 40% of the charts, which was all Australian music. I don't think any company in Australia would have that background. I mean, it was all Australian product, and I'm talking huge sales at the time. Acts like John Paul Young, William Shakespeare, AC/DC, The Angels, Rose Tattoo, Choir Boys. I mean, AC/DC went out and did it without radio in the initial stages, as did The Angels. They went out there and created the demand live, and it was just terribly exciting to work with acts that were that determined and that creative, and you know, it was just a whole era. I went to the first, when Bon went for his first audition with AC/DC, I was there up front. The Angels, when the Angels first started, Rose Tattoo. I mean, I toured with them.
With them? What was your
job? I was working with them on an A&R level. Once I had the recording, once they'd finished recording, I actually would sit in on the recordings, and once I had the recording, then I would work with it from there. I'd work
to get it played on radio.
Pushing it at radio level, but also working on all the artwork, working with the record companies and doing all the promotion with it. I basically took it from the time it came out of the studio.
Wow.
That was my gig, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, it was just that they were such energetic bands, and they were so determined to make it happen that you couldn't help but run with it as well. I mean, it was just that committed.
I've been doing photography for about 11 years professionally. I started out helping friends who were making film clips because I was in the film business before that. I was a film editor, and it was a hobby, and I just sort of progressed and it expanded, and it took over the world, and so I ended up doing it professionally and doing record covers, probably more than any other sort of photography, even though I do a bit of other stuff. I still do stills for films and a bit of advertising and that sort of thing. I'm now a freelance photographer, and I've got my studio happening. I've been doing that for about 6 years, and before that I shot mostly live, on location stuff, a lot of stuff for music clips, and in the studio, all sorts of different things, a recording studio. So it sort of changed from being a sort of documentary style of taking photos to being more studio-based. I kind of did a lot off my own bat, which happens, I think, for photographers in music mostly. Like, you have to shoot a lot of stuff for friends and for free and just get stuff happening, and then people start to call you. And I suppose I was lucky also because I did a lot of work for people that were well known early on, and so it gave me a help. People like Midnight Oil and things. Friends of mine actually did some clips for them, and that's how I started getting involved in that side of it. Okay, the first album cover, from beginning to end probably, was the Ian Moss matchbook cover, where I did the front and all of the insides and the back and the design and everything. I've been things like the Hoodoo Gurus, where Dave would say to me, I did a lot of shots of them previously for around the Kinky album, where I'd projected the image of themselves on their own bodies, which was quite fun at the time. And he liked that idea, and then for the more recent album, the name of which I've forgotten, Crank, he asked me if I could do the same kind of thing, but he had a specific idea of how he wanted it used. And that was kind of limiting in a way, because technically he wasn't sort of aware of what was involved to achieve it. So I had to change it a bit. Anyway, we ended up using a shot of a car on the front, and the shot that he wanted was on the back. I took the shot of the car. I was 8 months pregnant at the time. It was quite a tricky thing to do. I was lying on my stomach photographing this old car. For someone like Diesel, he's got a good idea about what he wants, and he knows his own direction. But we worked together on his clothes. He actually likes to shop, I think. He'd been overseas for a while, and he had lots of clothes to play with. He also has lots of guitars to play with, and that was quite a thing. He had been photographed by himself much before that. He has now, obviously. So he was quite shy, and we had to work on... that's why we used the guitars as props quite a lot in that instance, because he felt at home with them. And often you have to, go to a great deal of trouble for clothes, and some of the things I've done in the studio have been quite grand in scale, with a lot of costuming and scenery and all sorts of carry-on.
My name's Liberty, and I'm an sound engineer, come producer.
And you work mainly from Troy Horse, or you work all over the place?
I work in-house at Troy Horse Studios, and otherwise I just work wherever the band takes me. I did a course, one of those sound engineering courses, but I learnt more from going out and doing it. I also perform. I play guitar, and I was in a band at the time, and I was really frustrated not knowing what was going on, what fallback was, what feedback meant, what are all these leads doing, what microphone, you know, is best for vocals and guitars and drums, and so that's how I got into it. I really wanted to know what was going on. And I landed a job in cabaret, so I've been doing cabaret for the last 4 years.
Live sounding
Live
clubs?
sounding clubs, yep. Nominated for 3 Mo Awards.
And when did you move across into studios and become the hippest young producer around?
I've been doing it for the last only 12 months.
At Troy Horse?
Yeah.
Now, you've done heaps of independent bands.
Yes.
Can you tell me some of the names of the bands? Disney Fest?
I've done CD recordings for Disney Fest, Vicious Harry Mary, Nitocris. My job as a producer is to get the best performance out of the band. How do I go about making a band feel comfortable in the studio? Lots of candles, lots of incense, let them play the music that they want to before the session. Lots of Kinder Surprises, lollies, yeah, anything. It is long hours being an engineer, yes.
And don't you get exhausted?
I do, but I love that exhaustion. I love the hours. I love doing, 14 hours straight.
Paddy Mostyn has been one of the most important and influential publicists in Australia. She started as Johnny O'Keeffe's secretary in the 60s.
I was reading the classifieds one day. Probably didn't even know that was what they were called. And there was a job at Festival Records advertised for someone 18 to 25, I think it was. And I went not with any thought of getting the job, but I just thought I might see Johnny O'Keeffe or Cole Joy or someone, because the Australian recording artists at that time were far bigger than the majority of overseas artists. And so I just went along for the interview thinking someone might pop through the door of Festival Records. And then Johnny O'Keeffe was the A&R manager for Lee Gordon's record label, and he saw in me, a bit of a fan, and so got me to do his fan mail. I mean, I just, I used to do everything, I suppose. Yes, I used to, when he had a record coming out or whatever, I mean, I was involved in getting interviews for him. The terrifying thing is it only seems like a minute ago. It really doesn't seem, I suppose if you stop and you think, right, well now is 1994 and that had to be 1960-something, it's a long time ago. But it doesn't seem it. I then started to do everything. Every act that came into Australia, I basically did, I would think, for 18 years just about.
With your own company?
Yeah.
Which was called?
Paddy Mostyn Publicity.
Oh, right. So, with Suzi Quatro, did you actually go around Australia with her?
Yeah, with every act I've done. I mean, I would have done now so many hundreds of acts I can't even, I mean, I've forgotten more than most people would ever know. But I mean, everything from ABBA, McCartney, I mean, it's just endless.
Have you ever pulled any outrageous publicity stunts for your artists? Done anything that...
Oh, sure. Back in Bay City Rollers days and stuff. I mean, with all the teen acts, Jackson's first time around. Yeah, but I mean, that goes with the territory, really. But, those acts aren't a sort of few and far between now. It was only those sort of things happened with the teen acts, and like Suzi Quatro, where we had the Hells Angels tour with us, basically, and, really did attract a lot of press.
Did you organise the Hells Angels to
Yeah. Well, they didn't tour with us, but there was a chapter in every city, and they would come and meet us at the airport and give her a guard of honour into the city and all of that sort of thing. Out of all those numerous dozens upon dozens, I mean, I think the ones that I have the best memories of really, and who I still see a lot of, is Elton, who I still work with, of course, and George Michael, who I still see, Phil Collins, Sting, who I love to death. But I think it really still comes down, it's very much a people situation as a job. You have to like people, you have to have a lot of tolerance, and you have to be really, you have to feel what the right thing is to do. And I don't think you ever should compromise. And I mean, I certainly have gotten myself into a lot of trouble through that. But I really have always tried to sort of, I don't think the bottom line is a full press book. My motto is maximum coverage for minimum effort.